will in a few minutes. Because the reality is cyber attacks occur in the business community, the world around us, and within private clubs. We've already been working with a couple of clubs that are members of NCA that have had hacking attacks, and it's not fun. Our speaker today is an expert on this topic. Fred Sanderseer is the Chief Technology Officer for CNO, a New York-based firm specializing in security solutions. Fred is going to show you how attacks can occur, what your club needs to do to be prepared, and the things that you might want to bring to the attention of your board. Fred has a wealth of expertise in information security and compliance for the hospitality industry. Please join me in welcoming Fred Sanderseer.
Let's see if we can get right back on. Hello, everybody. Fantastic to be here today. Obviously, it's not under the most pleasant of circumstances. Obviously, with all of the ransomware that everybody's getting hit with right now. And so this is actually how we came to be standing here, that CNO came to be standing here. We've been fortunate enough to be supporting the hospitality industry for quite some time on the financial side of the house. They've been dealing with hospitality for over 30-something years. And as time went along, the concern of risk management has spread out into protecting the overall business operations against what we're about to talk about today, which is the concept of hacking. I'm super fortunate throughout my life to have had the opportunity to be in different roles where I've been protecting different environments. Obviously, to try to at least keep people from falling asleep after that wonderful lunch that you just enjoyed there. And maybe the people that are watching this remotely, I don't know whether they just had lunch as well, but either way, I'll try to keep your enthusiasm without going ahead and going crazy and blowing the mic out. Okay, guys. Fantastic. Hey, so throughout my life, I've been super fortunate. My father was an electronic technician at the post office for 36 years, back when he used to hand solder motherboards. So obviously, I didn't have a normal childhood growing up. And so spent my life troubleshooting as an earlier child and stuff like this. And as time went along, realized that I enjoyed the role of protecting and got the opportunity to go on the DMZ in Korea as a designated marksman and a sniper during the Olympics, the '88 Olympics. I'm getting older. I'm getting my birthday's this Sunday. But one of the great things is that throughout my life of protecting people, the whole objective is to try to ensure that people can go ahead and conduct their lives or conduct their businesses in the way that is most effective for them. Unfortunately, a lot of times, especially what we're about to talk about, is the idea that operations and just the concern of making sure that operationally everything is going to run well, that takes our focus. Now, obviously, since for the most part, not too much happens on paper anymore, the digital world and the concept of security has shifted into that realm. So I was really fortunate to be able to go ahead and take what I learned right from childbirth for the most part and adapt that through my life of protecting. I had the opportunity to go on the NYPD after my time in special operations with the U.S. government, and got the opportunity to protect the projects, or I should say, sorry, housing developments in Brooklyn, where all the famous boxers are from, like Tyson and everybody else like that. And that was a great experience to go ahead and understand the importance of documentation and how important it is to go ahead and make sure you're aware of what's going on. And that'll have more bearing as we go through some of the steps you should use to go ahead and protect yourself. So just trying to give you a little bit of framework, a little bit of background there. With CNO, one of the things that we do, or a bunch of the things that we do, is we help people when they have a breach. And some of the different examples we're going to go ahead and give you in a couple minutes here is what we're experiencing right now in hospitality and what we have seen over the years and why that occurred. But what I would like to do is initially start out with just some basic concepts. Obviously, you've been hearing all these terms thrown all over the place. So I'd like to just kind of go ahead and slow it down in a couple minutes here and walk you through the first couple of slides that I use when I teach the government and the military, specifically through a course that we call Certified Ethical Hacking. What I do is I put the people in a room, and this wonderful course is created by this company called Easy Counsel, and it provides 30 years of hacking, all the 30 years of hacking experience. Put them in a room, go ahead and explain the concepts, help them understand what's actually occurring during the attack, and then I teach them how to do it so that they can go ahead and properly defend themselves. So you'll see those slides throughout the, a couple slides in the introduction here to go ahead and just kind of bring you up to speed about some of the overall concepts. Is that okay so far? Great, fantastic. And as I get excited and I start going really fast and getting all hyper, you guys can just start going like this, and I can go ahead and slow it down to whatever is going to be most comfortable, especially after reading that meal there. But this is some of the different scenes that you've seen here. We do a lot of forensics investigations out in the field. When a client gets hacked or when we get contacted by somebody, our first objective is to try to figure out, once we go ahead and isolate the problem, what happened. Because it's one thing to get beat one time, but you don't want the same thing happening repeatedly. Obviously, a big concern of the people in this room is you are responsible for some degree of governance within these different organizations. And obviously, you're sitting here because you are entrusted with resources to protect your members. Everybody okay? Fantastic. Wonderful. So what you see in here, this is an example of us doing a forensics investigation. We go out to an environment, we make bit-level copies, we go ahead and grab all the data from all the sources, whether it was deleted or not deleted, doesn't make a difference. If it existed in the 1s and 0 format, we're going to go ahead and pull that, and we're going to go ahead and try to figure out exactly what happened so we can go ahead and make sure that you change your protective posture to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I've been super fortunate to go ahead and protect the military and help the military with this initiative here. What you're seeing here is it's just in Vilsec recently at the end of the class. If you're not familiar with Vilsec, Germany, it's a location that they refer to as stopping the gap if there was to be an invasion running across Europe. This is the first place. It's right on the German-Czech Republic border. I was fortunate to go ahead and help out one of the Army units there, and at the end of the class, they gave me this awesome stein. And this stein here actually represents the town of Vilsec that has been overrun throughout its history like 5 or 6 times, and each time, historically, they would go ahead and build a new castle or a new wall. And it's really interesting because in the center of the town, they have these metal plaques that describe the history all the way back to 200 AD. And so as an American going over and seeing things that are 200 AD, I was staying in a hotel from the 1400s, it's like, we're excited when we go to Richmond Town on Staten Island because stuff's from the 1700s. So it gives you a whole different perspective. But one of the great things that I've been fortunate enough to do is over the last couple of years, the U.S. government has created a directive called 8570. And 8570 is this directive that the Department of Defense has where anybody who's working in computers has to be trained. They have to learn how to hack, they have to learn how to do forensics, to go ahead and know what the bad guys are known. In addition to that, I was fortunate enough, everybody knows about the Target hack, pretty unfortunate situation. Target, in a massive wave of response to that, went ahead and hired all sorts of heavyweights in their environment. They created a federal forensics lab. And I was fortunate enough to go ahead and be brought in once they had that situation to train their staff. And so it was interesting. Our company just started an international division, and they leased me a townhome in Miami. I'm currently out in New York City area. That's where I grew up. But we have this international division now. And one of the things I didn't realize when we first set up the house there was I was concerned about the snakes with the frogs. I'm sorry, the snakes with the dogs. I wasn't even thinking about the concept of poisonous toads. There's a thing called a cane toad, and this cane toad, they were brought in from South America. The only thing that eats that thing is an anaconda. Obviously in southern Florida, there's no anacondas. So they have this epidemic with these cane toads that are making kids sick, and they have poison glands. They're 4.5 to 9 inches in size. I was thinking about the snakes, and so when my wife went down there and established that the international division down there and got everything going, put the fence around the backyard and stuff like this, I was not expecting a toad. One of the dogs ran out, picked up the toad, and immediately went into paralysis and died right on the spot. And so the people at Target felt bad, so it was during the class, so they ran out and got me this bullseye dog to go ahead and kind of replace the dog that was lost. But I just bring that up to that point up and the thing about the military for the reason that I've had the great opportunity to be in the combat environment, in the field, as each one of these different types of attacks have occurred over the years. And as a result, what you're about to get is some of that insight, hopefully. In addition to that, a long time, been doing this for a long time, super fortunate to be in the position I am with Sino, so thank you, Sino. Thank you. to get to continue to play and continue to defend and help people. So that's the overall objective of today. I'm here, like Jerry Maguire, to help me help you is what we're looking at. So what we'd like to do is first talk about this wonderful organization and the club associations. And this is an article that you'll see coming out, and it'll help you kind of get a chance to kind of revisit the concepts we're talking about today. This is coming out in next month in the Club Director. This is an article that I wrote here, and so hopefully it'll go ahead and help you to summarize some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So you can just right now just kind of sit back and relax, and hopefully try to absorb as much as you can, and then hopefully refer back to this, and it'll go ahead and reinforce some of the concepts. One of the things that we have up here, just if you're not familiar with this, is throughout many years of supporting hospitality, everybody's approach in defending their environment has been, they would say, hey, we're not a target. We're not we're not a big corporation. We only have, and the thing we always hear is, hey, we don't need you. We got a firewall. Besides, we have a guy that helps us out with our computers. We don't need you. So in this case here, one of the things that has changed is the cyber attacks. In the old days, it would be someone who was going ahead, generally in the United States or in a country or whatever, going ahead and doing different types of attacks. As I'm sure you're aware now, we're engaged in cyber warfare right now. What you're looking at on the screen here, this is an organization named Akamai, and what they do is they go ahead and take your web content and distribute it over 80,000 servers worldwide, so that you don't have a single point of failure or somebody's going to take on your website. No big deal. But the emphasis of this here and this Akamai app that you can go ahead and take a look at is, this is the amount of traffic occurring on the internet right now. The green indicates, the length of line indicates the amount of traffic. And this is pretty much evenly distributed. And if you want to go ahead and see it after here, you can come up and check it out here a lot. Or if you have an iPhone, you can go ahead and download the Akamai app. This is showing the amount of traffic on the internet. What this drop-down, this attack drop-down is showing you is the length of the line of the attacks. And the length of the line indicates the amount of attack traffic in the world right now. So what I would like to emphasize to you, if you come away with nothing today, is to realize that in the old days, you were not considered a prime target because you're a small organization. Maybe you have 1, maybe 5 external IP addresses. So you're like, well, we're small, people know we're small, we're not of interest to anybody. Well, that has obviously changed. But one of the things that's occurring right now is the world is trying to adapt to the cyber warfare. With the people that I teach for our government, they're concerned about the Chinese, North Koreans, and Iranians specifically, and now the Syrian. There's a whole bunch of other organizations that are coming online. Obviously, in addition to that, there is the hacktivists. We have anonymous. Obviously, if somebody in your organization says something questionable, you could also have the hacktivists coming at you. That's another concern. So here's the thing. With the way in which the technology is occurring and the way in which these attacks are occurring, there is an internet-wide sweep constantly occurring across the internet. So even though you may not have gotten hit in the past, if you are not protected, the whole objective that we're going to talk about is the idea the attackers are looking for good victims. In the first data hacking class, we spend the entire day, a hack consists of 90% recon and 10% attack. And that is pretty much a tool to do just about every single type of attack. And we spend the entire day trying to find good victims. And a good victim consists of someone who has poor protection, but lots of value. Now, obviously the organizations you guys are representing, you have club memberships, you have people of significance perhaps in your membership. The whole idea is that you have the sweetest target, and everybody in the world knows about that. So I just want to go ahead and I'll flip it. Here's an example, hospitality, the cyber threat. You guys are the new battlefield. Why? Because you have all the money and the least amount of protection generally. Because generally, the IT staff, they may be working as hard as they can, but you generally only have maybe an outsourced company going ahead and provide the protection. And you compare that to corporations. In corporations, like for instance in the military, the people that I teach, they have the administrators, and then they have the assurance people. They have entire units that all they do all day long is constantly verify the protection all day long. And so the whole model as to how you protect your environment, and most important, your members, PII and their credit cards and stuff like this, has to be readdressed. So just rolling back for a second here. This is what we do out in the field. Tomorrow, matter of fact, we're going to be out at a particular hospitality environment. We have a vulnerability assessment and a full-on audit going on in their environment. They have had only minor issues pertaining to hacking, but in a lot of cases, the way in which we actually ended up here, standing here right now, is because we got contacted by a particular club that had a ransomware attack. Then we got the wonderful opportunity to go ahead and go down to Washington, D.C. What was that, last month? Yeah, in May. It was out of the blue. We got the opportunity to go down there and talk to everybody there at the NCA national conference there. And during that, since it is a kind of closed door event there, one of the members interrupted and they raised their hand. They said, "Is it okay if I just go ahead and ask our membership?" And they said, "How many people have experienced ransomware?" What would you say? It was about 25%, maybe 30% of the people had their hands up in the air. And obviously, everybody's reluctant to go ahead and talk about this, but this is something that you as an organization obviously are addressing, starting to put it on the front burner, and obviously that's I'm happy to go ahead and help with what we're about to talk about here. So this is what we do. This is what I do. We have tactical teams that roll out. Somebody gets hit with something, we send incident response teams. They get on site, they start, they isolate the problem, and then they go ahead and try to figure out what's going on and try to help you change your protective posture. So just to go ahead and have some takeaway value with this, what I'd like to do is kind of slow it down a little bit and go through some of the terms that you hear over and over and over again, so that you can start to go ahead and address this, at least in your mind, get some frame of reference as far as how you're going to go ahead and start to think about this. And what I'd like to also do is, we've been fortunate enough today to go ahead and have enough time to go ahead and cover our material, but then obviously I would like to go ahead and give you the opportunity to ask questions in general, even about your personal concerns as well, pertaining to the protection of your life and your environment. And we'll do the best that we can to go ahead and help you with that. So, starting right off, here's the thing. We're talking about the idea of hacking versus ethical hacking. And obviously the hacker is trying to go ahead and exploit vulnerabilities. And this is going to be something you're going to hear over and over and over again. The whole concept as far as playing defense is trying to identify the vulnerabilities and remediate those so that those can't be exploited to cause a breach or to cause some type of problem. So the key word here is vulnerability. And we'll see that over the next couple slides. And obviously, when we're talking about the hackers, in this case, we're talking about anybody with malicious intent. It doesn't make a difference who it is. It could be a disgruntled worker, it could be somebody on the outside. In this case here, it's generally going to be people who are going ahead and posting stuff, or making things available, or specifically trying to phish your workers. In other words, go ahead and have a link to a site that might have malware, maybe have a malicious attachment, hoping that somebody is going to go ahead and open up an email. Obviously, you have to conduct business, so you have email addresses, and all it takes is someone inside the environment to go ahead and click on something, and it could potentially create a remote connection out to the attacker, and then the attacker now is not working, they don't have to beat the firewall anymore, they're working from inside the environment outward. So our previous defense, what we refer to when you see in the slides, the eggshell defense, doesn't work anymore because of the attack vectors have been modified. So one of the things that we're teaching our ethical hackers in the classes, ethical hackers are going to simulate techniques used by attackers to try to identify what's going on. Generally, what you'll see at the tail end here is, what do you do next? And we talk about the different steps. In some instances, when people have identified a couple of their external IP addresses or their endpoints that they're most concerned about, we will also then do pen tests. And what I'd like to do is, a lot of times you hear people throwing the word penetration testing around. I'd like to just help you out with that. When we're talking about doing ethical hacking, a pen test is simulating what the bad guys would do, with hopefully not creating any type of negative effect in your environment. And that's the difference. So obviously, one of the key things about this is how to go ahead and test the environment, to test the strength of the controls, or strength of the defense, to go ahead and verify what a bad guy could actually do. So the whole idea is, you may have a vulnerability here. Well, what is the significance of that vulnerability? Can anybody actually use that to cause any harm? And that would be a penetration test. So you hear the difference. You've probably heard these terms thrown around in your environments. So one of the things we're concerned about, obviously, is what is going to be the negative impact? What's going to be the negative impact? And in these slides, these are from the Certified Ethical Hacking course that we're talking about. So I pulled a couple of these out. So you would get the first part of the day there, and some of the different concepts that you would go ahead and see in that course. In this case here, obviously, the big concern that you guys have, other than loss of revenue, obviously, would be reputation. In this case here, you've spent your life or whatever the time you spent working for your particular organizations to go ahead and try to advance the reputation of your organization. Obviously, you love your organizations, you love who you're working with, and you love and have pride in the overall organization. One of the key things, could you imagine how horrible it would be if your organization was hosting an event or preparing to host an event, and then they had some type of breach that was disclosed nationally? And this is a very scary thing. And obviously, based on the clientele that you guys have, if you have members who are paying membership and they have their own personal life and their own personal financial tools that they're associated with you, if those were to be breached or disclosed, obviously they wouldn't feel comfortable going ahead and possibly paying membership dues and stuff like this. So you have a whole different concern than regular, Fortune 500 companies would, where they're only concerned about their bottom line and their reputation is about whether anybody's going to buy their product. In this case here, reputation is everything in your environments. Obviously, people are coming to your environments not only because they love what you do, but also because of the rich history that some of your organizations have, and you want to go ahead and maintain that. So, why do you care? You don't want the club's name tarnished, lost their membership. You don't want people going ahead and pulling out, not interacting with you because they are not. They're concerned about the safety of their personal financial information. And obviously, the other thing is this, and in the class we talk about the prudent man rule. The prudent man rule is the idea that, did you take the steps that a prudent person would have taken in a governance position like you have? Or did you put your head in the sand? Now, obviously, this is going to go ahead, when there is breaches, when there are different things that are going to come along, in most cases, in larger companies, they have class action lawsuits where they go after the C-level executives and the GMs and stuff like this to go ahead and identify, well, what did you do with the money that was entrusted to you to protect the environment? What did you say? Well, we never got hit in the past. We're not going to get hit. I'm telling you, with the way in which the Chinese are just going ahead and sweeping across the whole IPv4 range on the internet, they're going to find you. Somebody's going to find you. It's only a matter of time. And so the whole objective with that attack vector, just going ahead and hitting your outside is one concern. But obviously, everyday workers have to go ahead and interact with a lot of different tools, the internet, stuff like this, emails. And if they go ahead and take some steps and maybe are not aware, they might go ahead and click on something, go ahead and open up that attack vector from the inside out like we were talking about. So, like we're saying, you have great historical past of your club, and what we want to go ahead and do is protect it. So, in this case here, what we're trying to do is secure the business assets. We're trying to go ahead and protect the way in which you do business. What are they looking for? Well, the bad guys are going ahead and looking for data, any way they can get it. The credit card records are generally anywhere from $7 to about $70, depending on whether they get the CVV code, the additional numbers, or whether it's associated with an address, a human's name. It all changes the value. Now, just so you're aware of some of the different attacks, the old days of people going after you at home and stuff like that, that's not generally how attacks occur. In this case here, one of the key most important things that we teach in the hacking class is called SQL injection. And the whole idea here is to go ahead and try to grab the entire credit card file in one whack, all in one shot, and then be able to sell that on the black market. So this is a concern. Obviously, you have credit card information in there, and everybody's going to be coming after it. So they're trying to steal it, they want to sell it, and in addition to that, now we're concerned with extortion, and that's with the ransomware attack. So you have a worker, they don't mean to hurt your environment, they love the organization just as much as you do. And in this case here, they go ahead and click on something. As a result, it goes ahead and starts encrypting the hard drives all around your environment. If you have not experienced this, you need to talk amongst some of your peers and experience what it's like to get a ransomware attack. If in the middle of the workday, your servers start getting encrypted and nobody can interact with that, you are shut down. And there is absolutely no way to get that data. It's encrypted with AES-256 with the Reilly algorithm, and nobody's breaking that. You're not getting that data back. So one of the things you want to do is think about this ahead of time, think about the unpleasantness that could happen, and start to change your protective posture about that. Because there'd be nothing worse than hearing, when you hear some of the stories of some of the different clubs that got hit with this, they're in the middle of the workday, all of a sudden they start getting all notified and nobody can do anything. The servers are encrypted. And generally, the only way to go ahead and move forward, if you don't have lots of littles or redundant services, is to go ahead and pay that money. In a lot of cases, there's been a couple of clubs were fortunate enough to only be asked for $500. In some cases, it goes up as high as $16,000, $20,000. It's encrypted with AES 256. You're not getting that data back. So in this case here, if you think about it ahead of time, obviously the money is one thing. The operational problem is another, and even worse than that, if everybody's showing up at your environment, say for instance, and now they can't interact with the environment that you've been trusted with, they want to know what's going on. And obviously that would be a bad thing. So not to dwell on the bad things, because we don't want that to happen, but to emphasize what people have experienced. That's why we're here, and that's why we were asked to come out. Cool. All right, so just some of the basic terms. How does somebody get your data? Well, the term is attack vector. An attack vector is a pathway that a bad guy will use to go ahead and compromise your environment. One of the things you would want to go ahead and start to identify is what are all the unremediated potential vulnerabilities that could go ahead and be exploited through one of these attack vectors. That's the overall concern. Now, in your environment, generally, the problem is that there is not an entire full-time staff going ahead and doing this. In other words, in a Fortune 500 company, they'll have teams of 6 to 20 people, all getting paid $160,000 base as a security analyst, professional hackers inside the company constantly scouring their entire environment, trying to find flaws, trying to hack in their environment. Obviously, that's not the business model that we work with in the cloud environment. So our whole objective here is to plug the hole before somebody's able to go ahead and use that against you, is the concern. So what does it consist of? The terminology for the attack vector is we have the vulnerability. Now, the vulnerability is a weakness. The vulnerability is a weakness. The vulnerability is a weakness. And you can think about this in a lot of different scenarios. You can think about this as a boxer. You can think about it as somebody trying to defend a military environment or whatever. But the whole idea, like I said, 90% of the hack is the recon. And the whole objective that the bad guy is going to do is they're trying to reduce what's called the work effort. How can they get to the money doing the least amount of work as possible? So in this case here, what they're trying to do is identify the vulnerability. Now, what somebody will do, and one of the ways this methodology is done, is that there are certain things that all organizations have to do. Whether you're familiar with IT or not, obviously you use email. So email could potentially be an attack that could have vulnerabilities that could be exploited. But you could also have, obviously, you have your IP-based phones, and you have your networks. Everything in your environment hinges off the use of those ones and zeros in the data. So when the whole objective here is what the bad guy is looking to do is try to identify the vulnerability. Now, not to go ahead and downgrade the skill set of the hackers, especially if we're streaming and anybody somehow is getting a hold of hearing what we're talking about. We're not trying to agitate anybody, but there is a negative term called a script kiddie. A script kiddie is the biggest insult, and we generally, past the second day of the class, we never use that S word again. That means that the bad guy, doesn't know how to actually use the tool. They run what's called a script or an automated process, and they don't know what it's actually doing. Now, unfortunately, the world of hacking has come down to 2 phases. 1, identify what the victim's running, find an unpatched vulnerability, and run an exploit. An exploit is a known way to breach a vulnerability. So I'll give you an example of an exploit you already know. 1973 Caprice Classic, one of the cars that I learned to drive on. This thing was as wide as the paint on the road. If you haven't seen one of those recently, when you drive behind it, just the fumes coming out of that will remind you what it was like back in the old days. But in this case here, I remember making a turn, the whole thing boats, it was like being on a boat making a turn in that thing. In this case here, think what would happen if you were to go ahead and lock your keys in that. Now, I know you're saying 73 Caprice Classic. Well, I just mentioned that we have the international division down there in Florida. I've only been down there a little bit because obviously I'm on the road. Thank you, Sino, keeping me on the road all the time. But anyway, since I got that place in Miami in September, I've been down there a total of about 26 days because the whole world is getting compromised at the same time. And on a negative side, it's a bad thing. On the positive side, we're getting the opportunity to help people fix their environments, especially if they only got hit with a minor breach. But in this case here, going down to South Beach, you go to South Beach, you see all these 1973 Caprice Classics, all jacked up with the 22-inch wheels and stuff like this. I'm like, wow, I didn't want to drive that when I had to drive it. Why would anybody voluntarily drive that? So if you haven't seen one of those recently, if you haven't down the South Beach here, you'll see them all lined up. Everybody loves these old cars. I don't, but people do. Now, talking about vulnerabilities and exploits, if you locked your keys in a 1973 Caprice Classic, what would you do? Go ahead, just yell it out. What would you do?
Okay.
Coat hanger, hey, oh, the hackers. Smokes. In this case here, you know already an exploit to a vulnerability. Now you didn't create that. You used a known way to breach that vulnerability, right? That has a big piece of foam, the big wide black foam there, right? And you could literally, you could push that up, I mean, almost like a half an inch at least. You forget about the coat hanger, you almost put your finger through that thing. But what was the countermeasure to that? Going ahead and changing the doorknobs. Remember back then, the remedy made them straight. Made them straight. So that was a countermeasure. And then obviously the whole game of cat and mouse with the attackers is going ahead and saying, hey, if they have this vulnerability and they go ahead and change to the straight up button on the car. Well, how are we going to get it now? Well, now we just need a tool that can grab instead of just a coat hanger. So in other words, the technology is always evolving, and now with the tools. Since this is such big money on the black market, everybody is creating tools so that they can go ahead and have less skilled people in their warehouses going ahead and hacking all these American companies and clubs and everything else like this to go ahead and steal, because it's a big business. So in certain parts of the world, they have entire warehouses, like in Eastern Europe, there's warehouses full of hackers. And the whole concept is they come in, they hire you, and everything they give you money. You get a certain percentage of whatever you go ahead and find for the organization. But this is a business. This is a business. So don't think that if the way in which you defended your world in the past is going to work anymore. You got to go ahead and think about what are the different vulnerabilities. Now, right now you're sitting there going, you know what? I don't even want to hear about this. What do you mean vulnerability? How do I know what the vulnerabilities are all over the place? Well, the whole idea here is this: is that this is something that you need to think about. Is in hospitality, it's no longer enough just to have a firewall and have a couple of little defenses. You have to go ahead and have your entire environment checked out to identify these different vulnerabilities so that somebody can't go ahead and use an exploit or a defined way to go ahead and breach those vulnerabilities. Now, you're saying, well, yeah, well, we got checked out. I remember last year we had a PCI compliance scan. We ran some scans and stuff like this. Well, if you're not aware of this, the U.S. federal government has the United States Computer Emergency Response Team. This is a Homeland Security Department of Homeland Security initiative, and what they do each week is they go ahead and put out bulletins. And it was interesting when we're doing this in D.C. and how many people were in the room? About 150. There was quite a tremendous group of individuals in there, all highly motivated and stuff like this. And when they saw this kind of shocked them, hit them back a little bit. In this case here, what the government does is they go ahead and they post these bulletins. And what it does is, I don't know if you can see it there, but these are the vulnerability summaries. Each week, the U.S. government says, these are the things, if you are running these services, you must fix these because they have holes in them. Now, there's a saying among the hacking community, and if you ever get the opportunity in August to go out to DEF CON, which is the hacking convention, you'll see all the guys with the purple mohawks and all other stuff like this, but dude, you'll see the most common t-shirt you'll see will be Tuesday's patch is Wednesday's exploits. Every Tuesday, Microsoft, as an example, goes ahead and issues all the patches for their products. And every Tuesday, those are pumped out. Cisco does the same thing. All the different organizations pump all these different patches out to do what? To patch, the holes, the vulnerabilities, exactly. They're patching the vulnerabilities to go ahead and prevent what? Somebody from exploiting those vulnerabilities. Now, just as an example, here is last week's, this is June 22nd. So I wanted to go ahead and make it as current as possible. So yesterday I went ahead and downloaded, took a look at this. So this is for the week of June 22nd. And the idea here, what I'm trying to emphasize is that every week, these vulnerabilities are identified. And these are the ones that are known about. There's another thing called a 0 day that you'll hear people throwing around. The concept of a 0 day is that when the bad guys go ahead and identify a vulnerability, they're not running to Microsoft to tell them, hey, Microsoft, you need to patch this or whatever. What they do instead is they're going to keep that in the underground for as long as they can. And there are 0 days. And the concept of a 0 day is that once somebody discovers it, say, for instance, Kaspersky or whatever, what they're going to do is they're going to notify the vendors. The vendors are going to go ahead and create a patch to patch that vulnerability we were talking about. And then obviously it's going to come out as an update to your machines and stuff like this. However, in the underground, the whole objective is to find an exploit or find a vulnerability that nobody knows about. That's called a 0 day. And as a result, that is going to be effective until the vendor issues a patch. Now, the significance of what we're talking about here is every week, as the government eventually finds out about these holes that the bad guys are using and the vendors start to address them, it comes out in this. So this is just this week alone. They identify them by high, medium, and low. And this is this week. Here's some of the high vulnerabilities. Okay, great. Here's high. There's some more. There's some more. You guys up on that? This just came out yesterday. Anybody patching against these right now? Well, that's the high. How about the medium? Here's the medium for this week alone. Medium. Medium. This one's the government identifying right here. If you're running any of these products or any of these services, you got to go ahead and get those patched because they are vulnerabilities. And obviously, they could be potentially exploited. So you can see the significance and the challenge of this. And the bad guys love this. The more complex the systems are, and the whole idea is now, since you're not running things on paper, everything is digital. So it doesn't make a difference what it is you're running. The programs and the systems are so tremendous in the number of lines of code that there's people all over the world making a fortune off of exploiting these systems. So it isn't one vendor or another vendor. It's just which one has been identified and how is it being used at the time. So the whole objective here is that if, say, for instance, there was some type of flu or whatever, remember we had like the bird flu and all that. If you knew that that was out there and you could go to a local whatever and get a vaccination, you would go and get a vaccination. In a lot of cases, the old defensive method of saying, oh, we got a firewall, we got an IT guy, that isn't helping you anymore because you need the vaccine to go ahead and plug up those vulnerabilities. So that's what we're talking about here.
Quick question.
Sure, yeah.
So if you go daily and check these government sites, are you vulnerable now? Is there any hackers looking for people who check on these things so they could be a target?
Any activity with electricity flowing through it could potentially jeopardize. I mean, anything could be compromised. I mean, unless you're writing in a marble notebook and you throw it in a safe and you got it surrounded by barbed wire, claymore mines, tripwire, and 4 pit bulls or something like that, and maybe 2 bouncers with bats, then you might be good, assuming you have a moat around it and you have no. But in this case here, the whole objective is generally, for the most part, by going to different sites, yes, there are different sites where you could get what's called a drive-by download. And the idea is if you say, for instance, your browser, the program that you're running, whether it's Internet Explorer, whatever, if it has unpatched vulnerabilities, you could get a drive-by download if that site has been compromised. The government is constantly scouring their sites to go ahead and make sure that the instances of the virtualized servers they have are relatively clean. I wouldn't just Google something, just go to some hacking site to try to find out about some vulnerability, because if you have an unpatched browser, you could get what's called a drive-by download just by visiting the page that compromised the machine, is the concept behind that. But either way, the whole objective here is that this isn't in the old days, it used to be, you go ahead and get your PCI scans done, a vendor would come in and check you out and stuff like this. The whole idea is it's a constant vigilance that's required. And now even by going ahead and identifying these different vulnerabilities, this is just telling you that they exist, and it has some links about how to go ahead and start to defend against it. And one of the things that your IT staff and you guys are doing the best that they can, but they're trying to keep the printers running. They're dealing with people not being able to do something, and they're busy running things from an operational standpoint. So that's the whole concept here, is that there are different vulnerabilities that are constantly popping up, and with the scanning tools and with the tools that are out there, those are being constantly updated to go ahead and look for the new vulnerabilities that are out there, and that's the emphasis on that. So one of the things we're looking to go ahead and do in your environment, one of the things you want to start thinking about is this, what we call a security triangle. And the whole concept here is we want to go ahead and obviously be moving the ball towards being more secure, right? We talked about the idea we don't want to have operational flaws and have our environment compromised or having our data stolen. So obviously we're going to go ahead and try to play, we want to do security. Now, one of the things that we're always concerned about is, as you know, in your environments, everybody's concerned about having more functionality, more ease of use. Oh, it's too cumbersome and stuff like this. So the whole idea is that this is always a balancing act. So as you're talking to whoever is helping you with your security, you're going to hear this constant push and pull from the managers and the people who have to do things from an operational standpoint. They want to have more functionality. They want it to be easier so that their workers can do whatever they need to do. But the challenge is how to go ahead and secure that environment as well. So one of the terms that you'll hear in the world of security is the term hardening. And that's the concept of removing unnecessary functionality. So just going back to what we were talking about is that if you have different services that even have vulnerabilities, well, are those services that are critical? Should they even be there? An example would be, and I'm going to get into a bunch of examples coming up of what we see in people's environments. But perfect example, go into a boutique hotel in New York City. And in these boutique hotels, generally they don't have any signs on the front. They just have a number on the door. Obviously, famous people, rich people, whatever, are going to go ahead and be there. And the whole objective is they want to be able to come and go without having people walking in there, you know, trying to identify what they're doing. And in this case here, we go into one particular hotel that had an incident. And as we're waiting for the GM to go ahead and come down and bring us up into the environment, we had the opportunity to go ahead and see how they were running their front desk. And in this case here, they had like 3 podiums, and they try to make them look as modern as possible so it doesn't look like you're walking into a McDonald's. I mean, it's a boutique hotel. And so in this case here, we had these 3 like real modern podiums. And they had 3 laptops, one in each one. They had the workers standing behind there, going ahead and checking people into the hotels and stuff like this. So as we're standing there talking, waiting for the GM, look at the screens. And every screen has a different set of icons on it. Now, let me just get you up to speed on why that's significant. If there's different icons in every desktop, it's usually a good indication that that worker standing there is a power user or is logged in as an administrator, which means that they can download stuff while they're killing out their work. So they're standing there behind the desk, whatever, and they're going to go ahead and play some game. They're going to download a song. They're going to download whatever. You look on there, you got all the different icons. That is of tremendous concern. In this case here, they have increased the usability. In other words, if you're logged onto the machine, not using a limited user account that doesn't have any power to do stuff, a lot of times that becomes cumbersome. And so to increase the usability, they'll go ahead and have those machines logged in an administrator role. That means that that individual, going back to what we were talking about, if that individual now is operating as an administrator, it means that whatever they attempt to do will be unrestricted. In this case here, they're downloading songs and tools and games and all sorts of stuff on there. One of the most important things we do on the Wednesday of the class is I teach the class how to take any legitimate executable program and how to use what's called a wrapper and create what's called a Trojan. The whole objective here is that worker now goes ahead and downloads some program, game, or song, and in the foreground, they see that whatever they're looking at. What the Trojan is doing, it's now being installed in the background and creates, in a lot of cases, what's called a rootkit. And it's at the root of the system. Without going ridiculously deep, it means that this program now has complete access to everything at what's called a super user level. And this is, everybody is unaware of what it's actually doing because the rootkit, if you were to go ahead and ask the system what's running by typing in directory of dir or hitting Control-Alt-Delete and bringing up the task manager and asking what's running, when you ask that, you're asking it from like ring 3 or a higher level of non-protection. And the kernel is where everything actually occurs. When that Trojan is installed here, and you now are up here and you ask it, hey, what's running on the machine? It sends that request down. The rootkit will clean any instance of itself. And when it displays that list of what's running on the machine, it will not be there. That's the purpose of the rootkit. So in this case here, you go ahead and say, oh, I'm looking at what's running on my machine. I don't know why my machine is running so slow. And historically, you may have had a machine that as you're running, it's getting slower and slower and slower and slower. It might have had something similar to that effect, where there's a rootkit running there and it's using the resources, but you're unaware that it's even there. So when we go into an environment, we see that there's 3 laptops all with different icons all across there. That's a big concern. That's a big concern. And the idea was, you may have had the intent of securing the environment, but by increasing the usability and increasing the functionality, it's opening up the potential attack vectors that could hurt you. And that's just an example to try to go ahead and explain the concept of what's called the usability triangle in security. Everybody okay? Anybody have any questions before we move on? All right. Okay. Hopefully this is helping you identify some of the concerns or some different ways to think about security, even on your personal, at a personal level, of how your family is going ahead and interacting with technology. Now, like I said, the challenge in hospitality generally is this, and even in most companies in the United States consist of 200 workers or less. Now, you think about an operational environment. If it's a law firm, it's a club, it's whatever, and it has less than 200 workers, you probably can't justify having an IT administrator, right, at 90,000, whatever, and then having a security analyst at 160,000 when you only have 200 workers. So most companies don't have that in their business model. It's not how they function. And this is what the bad guys are counting on. And so in this case here, it's super important. A lot of times we go into people's environments and they'll have a service company. There was one particular company we got called on for an incident response. We go to their environment, and I have a team breakdown, and in this case here, I was fortunate enough to be on this particular crew that we were bringing out. But in one of the teams here, we're out in the environment, and I have dedicated scanners, guys who are just specifically scanners, and break down pretty much like the 12 areas of PCI data security standard. And I have specialists that handle like 3 of the 12 areas, and they help scour the environment to identify the different vulnerabilities. In this case here, I was talking to the GM, and my scanner runs in and goes, "Freddie, you got to check this out." I'm like, so we run over to the tool and we look, and I said, "No, that can't be right. Run it again. Run it again." He comes back a couple of minutes later. He goes, "You got to see this." Sure enough, they had an incident. It wasn't related to this vulnerability, thank God. They had a different problem, which was actually that they weren't going ahead and shredding the credit card information that came over the fax. So they had an operational problem as far as how they were dealing with their transactions. And the people were throwing it in the garbage. And if you're not familiar with New York City, in this case here, the paper goes in a clear bag. And anybody in New York City walking down the street, if they see paper in a clear bag that has not been shredded, they're going to grab it. That's how they actually got compromised. And they were very fortunate that there was only one customer that had a bunch of charges, whatever that were identified after they had left their environment. In this case here, the scanner calls me over there. I look at it again, and sure enough, they had 4 servers in their DMZ directly connected to the internet that had not been patched in 4 years. Remember we talked about those vulnerabilities? Those weekly vulnerabilities that you saw? Those are for all the different products. If you even just think about Microsoft Patch Day, Tuesday Patch Day, right? Like I said, the hackers wear the shirts. Tuesday's patches, Wednesday's exploits. Now, based on what you know about vulnerabilities and exploits, in this case here, if Microsoft produces a patch, as an example, they put that patch out on Tuesday. It's a rally cry for the bad guys to say, "Hey, that patch is patching something." What's a patch? And the idea, what they do is they reverse engineer the patch, figure out where the hole is, and then they create an exploit. And then using the term script kiddie, and we'll use that today, but we won't use that again, right? Script kiddie. The reason why I say we don't use that is there was a particular incident where one of the network defenders, historically, they hacked the hacker, went into the chat that controls the malware, and they called the hacker a script kiddie. That guy took that and posted it on all the underground hacking sites, saying that that individual called them all script kiddies. Their network was held down for 10 consecutive days where nobody could go ahead and interact with their web-based front end, and they do transactions. So we don't use that as script kiddie, so we use it for today. But after that, here's the whole idea. Is now with these exploits, since there's so much money here, if you have a whole factory of hackers, you can't have them sitting there like in Swordfish and all these crazy movies we see guys touching a keyboard. Hacking consists of 3 clicks, click, 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 and launch the attack, because it's more cost effective for the bad guys to create these exploits. And so as a result, once they identify that vulnerability exists, they grab the exploit, and there's tools like Metasploit, where basically you identify what the victim's running, you look up the exploit, and you fire the exploit out. And if it works, you get remote control in a lot of cases and different things like this. So it's reduced even the most technically elite hackers into script kiddies. Why? Because everybody's still counting on their firewall, or everybody's counting on these legacy concepts. So in this case here, we're always concerned about where we're at in this world. And obviously, from an operational standpoint, we have to not, keep being concerned about usability and functionality for our workers, because we got to conduct business. But the objective here is to be vigilant about the patching and about checking for the vulnerability. So, with that being said, now the 3 most common attack vectors that we see in hospitality, we'll go ahead and talk about those coming up here. Vulnerabilities, like we said, the vulnerability is going to be exploited. The vulnerability is going to be exploited. And in this case here, we're trying to go ahead and right now discuss how not to be the next victim. Everybody okay? I know it's unpleasant to think about, a Wednesday morning, you have an event in your banquet room or whatever, and meanwhile you have everybody getting ready to do whatever operationally they're going to do throughout the day. And the person who's going ahead and processing their credit cards or taking transactions says, "Hey, my system isn't working." And then the next person goes, "Wait a second, I can't do anything either." And all of a sudden you realize the entire environment is compromised. That's the unpleasantness that we see on a daily basis. That's why we've been asked to come here and kind of make you aware of it, so that we can't put our head in the sand anymore. Everybody okay? Good? All right. So what do we see most of the time? Like I said, missing patches. And here it is, Tuesday's patches, Wednesday's exploit. This is something we see over and over again, because generally people will go ahead and be concerned about that once a year PCI self-assessment. Yep.
Our company tests all the patches before they implement.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you have to test the patches for the reason that if you put a patch in the environment and it conflicts with how an application runs, then it's just as bad as a hack because now that application is not going to work.
But it seems like
Everybody is very far behind. And even the best you can do. Now, there are organizations that will just go ahead and just say, you know what, we'll take our chance, I'm going to dump the patch and stuff like this. Now, the more specific types of applications you have, the higher the probability that a patch could cause a conflict. So in other words, the concern is this. You don't want to roll out a patch that's untested. Back in the day, I used to teach in Times Square for 10 years. I used to teach cybersecurity. And I had a picture of this individual called Dan Farmer. Dan Farmer created Satan. Satan is a network tool called a security administrating tool for administering networks, whatever. Anyway, it was this vulnerability assessment tool. And he had a famous quote. He said, the only thing worse than a virus is a hotfix from Microsoft. And what I'm making reference to is that there's different types of patches. A hotfix is when you have a problem, you contact Microsoft, they throw a couple of developers in a room, they give you a quick solution that has not been tested. What your IT staff is concerned about is using an untested patch. Now, when you talk about Microsoft patches that they're rolling out on Tuesdays, those are generally tested to work with most applications. Now, the challenge that you guys have is that you are running applications perhaps that are specific to running a club, perhaps running, setting up tea times, whatever it is. So the challenge is that if you are only using programs that you bought at Staples, then it would be, those are generally the ones that everybody is testing about how the conflict of how a patch would negatively affect that. However, if you're running software that somebody wrote for you or is not mainstream in like Fortune 500 companies, it may cause a conflict. And so in this case here, that's what Dan Farmer was making reference to.
But the Microsoft one, you say, usually tested pretty well.
Yeah, they are. And that's why we never go ahead and use hot fixes or we never Google to find a patch. We generally ensure that as a bare minimum, we use those patches that the vendors create. And the whole idea is we're trying to lessen the negative impact that a patch could do. Because the whole idea is they're running it against standard, they're figuring you're running Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and some basic applications, and that's what they're testing it against. But it could always have a negative effect, and that's why your team is doing a good job if they're testing the patches before putting it in the production environment. But in a lot of cases, they may be testing against machines that don't have those, all those different variations. In other words, so if you have 3 accountants, say, for instance, they may be using programs that were not tested with the patching. In other words, you may have 50 machines or 20 machines, and they'll go ahead and they'll test the patches against the machines that have most of that software installed on it. Obviously, you know about the licensing. If it's an expensive piece of software, you may only have 3 licenses, and those are only running on the, say, for instance, accountant's machine. So the challenge is this: you're always trying to deal with this problem of a patch coming out and making sure that you're patching it in a timely fashion. But you want to go ahead and test them first. So this is why that is on everybody's shirts at the hacking conventions, because they realize that they could go ahead and reverse engineer a patch on Tuesday, and even if they could get it out in 2 weeks, create an exploit, well, they could wipe out most of the companies if that vulnerability is still there. And in most cases, like you're saying, nobody's just going to be pumping patches out into their environment without testing it. That would be a bad thing. So they're doing the right thing, and the delay between the testing of the patch when it first came out to applying it in their environment, that's always the challenge that people have. How does the military deal with this? They have entire teams of patchers. They have entire teams of patchers who are constantly testing this all night long in off shifts, and then they're trying to get those patches to the systems as fast as possible. In a real production environment, in hospitality, you might go ahead and you'll scan a machine, you'll see different applications, maybe not the Microsoft operating system, but any of the programs that are on that are a potential attack vector. If any of those individual applications have not been patched, that's also the challenge. So it's an ongoing battle. Yeah, it's always a challenge. So you're right on the money with that. You want to test your patches, but you want to get it out to the environment as quick as possible. Everybody okay? Great. All right, guys. So end user awareness. Now, like I said, having Trojans and malware embedded into everyday applications that people download and use creates a whole different problem. All workers generally will have access to the internet. And we'd like to go ahead and have the functionality where they have no icons on the desktop, no taskbar, and one folder. They click on that folder and it makes a remote connection to whatever it is they need to do their work. Nobody does that. That's not a realistic work environment. So in a lot of cases, just I encourage you to go ahead, just as one example, watch to see your workers potentially charging their phone or their iPad or their tablet off that USB port. 90% of all malware being written right now is written for mobile platforms. Why? Because they know this is the easiest attack vector. The worker is doing their work at home or they're doing whatever, and they go ahead and they bring the device into work and they charge it in that USB port. And now what they've done is whatever they were doing on their laptop at home, whatever websites they were going to, potentially getting drive-by downloads, whatever applications they installed, that didn't go through your corporate vetting process of what applications are in there. So this is the concern. And this is why when you hear that BYOD, the bring your own device, this is a problem that is driving the IT staffs crazy because everybody wants to go ahead and have that ease of use, especially if they're already working off their own devices and stuff like this. But the second they make that connection from this device that's potentially compromised, and they now go ahead and jack that into the USB port that's connected to a machine, that's connected to your network, that's connected to the switch, that's connected to the servers, well, guess what? Now there's a beautiful path for that ransomware to get to your servers, and bam, they got you. So the concept of going ahead and saying, well, we don't, we're protected, we got a real good firewall and stuff like this. Well, that's not the attack vector anymore. Nobody's doing it. That stuff you see in the movie of Swordfish, that's the TV. That's make-believe. Nobody's touching the keyboard, and nobody's trying to beat a firewall. Those companies, their whole life, their whole market consists on being able to protect against that impact. So nobody's doing that anymore. The whole objective is to go after the worker because the worker is a worker. They're busy doing stuff. They're doing their everyday life. They go ahead and they connect and they charge your phone off of that USB port. They're running an Android operating system. Did they patch that? Well, it's not under your control. And Greg, right? This is one of the things I was just talking to Greg a little while ago. He's talking about in the environment he works in, they have Blackbirds. Now, if you're not aware of this, one of the things we teach in the hacking class is now in version 8 of both the CHFI, the Computer Hack and Forensics Investigator, and version 8 of the Certified Ethical Hacker, is there's now a mobile section. There's never been a mobile section before. And one of the things we talk about in there is how the bad guys will steal the developer's certificates and then go ahead and use those to go ahead and be able to now post and get clearance for an application that's been compromised and sign with this digital certificate and post it in the BlackBerry app world, or post it in any of these different locations where people can go ahead and download them onto their mobile devices. So in this case here, there is a lot of protective mechanisms that have been put in place. But the whole objective here is that by adding that functionality, you have all sorts of problems. And this end user awareness, this is no longer a joke anymore. In the past, we would just say, focus on educating your IT staff so they know what they're doing and they can play defense. That's not the case anymore. It's the end user that the bad guys are going after. Because whether they bring a device into work or not, generally, you don't have an environment like in the government. What they have is they have these different networks. And the different networks, you have to go ahead and put this smart card, their ID card now has cryptographic information on it, stuff like this, and they have to have that in their possession to go ahead and log on to the secure network. In your environments, generally, you have one network. You have one flat network. It's what you're doing. I mean, how many computers do you usually have? Maybe you have 35 computers in the club, maybe 60. Maybe one that's running Windows XP that's by the the PGA running your Teton, something like this, maybe outside or whatever. But the whole idea is anything that's connected to your environment is a potential attack vector. And so the concern here is in a lot of cases that end user awareness. We're trying to go ahead and make sure that the workers know what they should and shouldn't do, what they should and shouldn't do. And that goes back to, that's probably the hardest aspect, is going ahead and trying to change the corporate culture as far as what people actually do in your environment. And you can think about this even as far as like just things you've seen perhaps, maybe tips and tricks that they might have on CNN, and then you tell your family, hey, don't do this, don't just be clicking on stuff all over the internet and installing stuff all over your machines and stuff like this. So that would be something that you would be concerned about. That's something that we generally see. Now, PCI requires yearly security awareness training. It also goes ahead and requires that you have a security awareness, a computer use agreement that's signed by the workers. So you have civil liability protection if the worker does something stupid. Now, in most clubs and most hospitality, when I asked them, when we're going through the PCI stuff, now, just so you're aware, when you talk about PCI and when you get fraud, somebody didn't compromise your machine. You use your credit card somewhere where the company did not have to do a legitimate PCI inspection. In order to go ahead and do PCI, to be PCI approved, if you're an organization that meets the criteria where you're not doing millions of transactions a month, it involves a self-questionnaire. I always get a kick out of this when we go into environments in hospitality. Yes, maybe you're PCI compliant. I say, oh yeah, we're PCI compliant. And you say, oh, well, how'd you get that? So, oh yeah, my IT guy sent the form in. Your IT administrator sent in the security auditing form. You went through all of the steps of that PCI. Yeah, our guy signed it off and he sent it in. When you get compromised, when you get hit with fraud, it's not generally your machine. You use that in a location where some IT administrator was signing this off and handing it in. There is a lot that goes through an actual legitimate thing. Like when you're talking like Target and organizations like this, they have the stringent degree that they're held accountable to PCI is so much higher than in most environments, because for the most part, you're thinking, well, nobody's going to come after us. Well, guess what? They are coming after us. So as unpleasant as part of this is here, just trying to go ahead and make you aware of where and how the bad guys are taking advantage of it. In a lot of cases here, this end user awareness training, that consists of basically about 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, if you have a large organization split into 2 groups. But if not, if it's a smaller organization, 3 hours. And it's basically, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, or you could potentially compromise the club, is the overall objective of security awareness training. And it's a PCI requirement, yet I've never been to any hospitality environment where anybody's ever done any type of end user training across the board, and then comprehensively each month went ahead and verified that they are adhering to this with monthly training and stuff like that. So either way, what I'm just trying to do is make you aware of the best practices that have been put across the board, just so that you can start to think about, hey, let's re-examine this, because you don't want to be putting them in a situation where something negative happens. Everybody okay? All right, good one. Okay. Default settings and services, Swiss cheese network. Here's the thing. If you have an environment and you no.
You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that.
And it's funny you mention that, because when I'm doing these certified ethical hacking classes, it's interesting. You know, I go out to Kansas City a lot for the Federal Reserve, and I do those classes for them and stuff like this. In a lot of cases, it'll be in a school, and there'll be, let's say, for instance, an IT administrator, and that IT administrator is pretty much, they're the only guy. And so there'll be a company, 160 workers and stuff like this. They got that one IT guy. And they're doing the best they can. They maybe have somebody else that assists them 3 days a week. They have a hands person, so to speak, and they're held accountable for everything. On the first day of class, it's so exciting to watch. And they got the book out there as we're hitting stuff. They say, yeah, I gotta check this. I'll check this. By the time it hits around Tuesday, and they've already done a bunch of these different hacks themselves, they're starting to say, wow, what do I do? By Wednesday, they're usually starting to get visibly sick because they haven't slept. They realize they're sitting in what we call a resume burner. A resume burner is where somebody's all excited to get this great IT position, and the company brought them in because they knew they had weak security. So they bring this individual. This individual jumps in that job. They're all excited to get all this money and stuff like this. And all of a sudden, just like you're saying, they realize, uh-oh. So by about Wednesday, they start getting whatever. Thursday, they got headaches, stomach aches. They haven't slept. You can see they're not taking notes anymore, and they're ready to throw their hands up. By Friday, the book is closed, and they're just like sitting there mesmerized. Especially once they get a chance to play with all these different tools and hacks. So the whole objective is this: you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That PCI thing that you heard thrown around, the data security standards, is your friend. It's not the thing that, man, we got to go ahead and get that PCI thing done. In this case here, it's a list of 12 different things that you should generally check out, and all the subdivisions of different things that you would be concerned about. And obviously, it takes a lot, obviously, to get through that. But the whole objective is to go through the best practices. The best practices how to protect an environment. And the whole objective here is to not have any missing vulnerabilities that have not been remediated. So the whole objective here is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What you're going to do is you're going to systematically go through trying to go ahead and shore up each component or each type of concept at a time, one piece at a time. So if nothing else, I'd like to have you at least start thinking about that PCI DSS as your friend instead of your enemy, because it's what the bad guys are doing. one of the things the bad guys are doing is obviously they are looking for the weak link. They're looking for the weak link. And in a lot of cases, they don't necessarily even have to manually do this. They're going to go ahead and run automated scans and automated things against your environment to try to go ahead and find the vulnerabilities as well, because they're trying to find the easiest way to compromise the environment. Does that make sense? Okay, outstanding, guys. So, and just default settings and services. Think about this. Oh, yeah.
Charging station?
Not if they're not passing data. However, I say that with caution. I've had a couple individuals in the room that work for particular government agencies, and they talked about incidents where they have had compromises by using devices manufactured in another country that have been built to go ahead and compromise the environment by going through other pathways, including the electrical pathways, if there are problems with that. Just as an example, I'm talking about electricity. I was at DEF CON a couple of years ago, and I thought this was amazing, just to kind of get the mindset of what these guys are doing. And there's a dude up on the podium talking about, he's trying to figure out a way. He's looking at his laptop, right? He's looking at his laptop. He powers off the laptop, and he realizes the light is on and the battery is charging, right? The battery is charging on the laptop. You know what this guy's talk was about? Was how to go ahead and mess with the chemical process of that charge and blow up the laptop on somebody's lap. That's what the whole talk was about. The guy was saying, I tried to figure out, I said, wait a second, if this is running a chemical reaction to store that charge, right? There's electrolytes in the battery, something. His objective was to try to blow up a laptop on somebody's lap, because if he can make an exploit, he can be blowing up laptops all over the place on people's laps. I'm sitting there going, wow, I'm worried about PCI and my clients and stuff like this. This guy's trying to blow up laptops. Anyway, he said he couldn't do it. But what he did do was he created a tool that would allow him, and this is after he messed with one of the manufacturers. They had actually, to be smart, what they did was the chips that were involved with charging the laptop batteries, they had created their own code and everything else. This guy figured out the code after a whole year, and in this case here, he created an exploit that if he runs it against your machine, it'll do what's called brick your battery, so that battery can never be charged again. So in this case here, that was a couple of years ago. So you would never say never about how somebody could compromise your environment. But in this case here, that was going right after the batteries and the charging. But one of the things the federal government does is before they use anything in the environment, they very carefully vet it, because they have had instances where devices that were made in China had pre-Trojanized chips in there. As a result, giving somebody else, we'll leave it at that, opportunity to go ahead and use that device once it's inside the government environment as an attack vector to compromise their environment. So anything that has electricity flowing through it could potentially be compromised. Phones. Well, generally, if it's in a charging station and it's isolated, that's one thing. But in a lot of cases, if now your worker has that phone in the environment, what do? They go over the Wi-Fi. Now, if the Wi-Fi, in a lot of cases in your environment, in hospitality, you have a guest Wi-Fi and you have the corporate Wi-Fi, and obviously you're trying to go ahead and verify what's going on. But if the worker now is connected on the business side, well, it's the same thing as being in there. So just having a phone in that environment is something that generally in hospitality we don't really think about, but it's something that could hurt you even while the phone is charging. The phone is, if it's even in the environment, could be used over the Wi-Fi. Yeah.
It's like those phones like the airport. Yes, charging phones.
Sure. There hasn't been any widespread instances of that yet, for the reason that generally that pathway is just for the purpose of charging. In corporate environments, however, there is technologies where the wiring of the phone, of the electricity, is used to pass signals. And that's what they're looking to do. If they compromise a phone that's plugged into a socket, a wall outlet now, then they'll be looking to pick up the signal. So that's the thing. But as far as the default settings, so go back to the concept of your environment. If you have one IT person, they are going to have a certain degree of expertise, but they are not going to go ahead and, say, for instance, be installing every single service that you need. If they go ahead and do an upgrade, what are they going to do? They're going to go ahead and bring in a contractor. And what does that contractor do? Who knows? In this case here, when we go into hospitality environments, you know what we find? We find the most basic of pathways enabled. As an example, you build a network, you need to go ahead and be able to monitor what the network's doing. One of the different communication protocols for that purpose is SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. And its job is this, is that if you're, say for instance, the IT person, you're sitting at your machine, you could go ahead and ask that device how it's running, and as a result, you have a dashboard program that's running, and it's saying, okay, everything's running right, everything looks good. How does it know that? Because it's getting these reports. When a contractor comes in and say, for instance, installs a new mail server or a bunch of servers to go ahead and handle your emails, you're having them build that service out. Their objective is to go ahead and have the email function, be able to test it, and then leave and hopefully not get called again. That's what their plan is. As they're doing that, you don't know what protocols they turned on. In almost most hospitality environments we go to, we will go ahead and see SNMP, that communication protocol, and it'll be left with the default administrator names and passwords and the default what's called a community string. And as a result, the attacker can go ahead and scan the environment for port 161. When they get that report back, they can run default word lists against that. And as a result, now they're in control of that device. They could go ahead and ask for information from that device as an example. And so the whole idea here is that the default settings and services that a contractor puts in, they turn on. If those are not checked, then they're attack vectors that are potentially sitting in your environment. So the whole objective here is to try to identify what's running in your environment. And like we said, shut off any functionality you don't need, like all of these different communication mechanisms that you may not actually have to use on a daily basis. So we already talked about the idea of the eggshell defense, different misconceptions. We don't need it, we got a firewall. Well, as you know, that wall isn't your only cure all. In addition to that, operational support versus security support. Now, they're horrible. What do? They're an administrator. Functionality so that your workers have a better environment. Security. I can turn anybody. Security and security mindset is completely different than an administrative mindset generally. And so the whole idea in environments where they don't have the ability to have what's on the payroll, use all coming out. A lot of times you may have an administrator, but a security engineer is a different role. So many different things we see ransomware all over the place. I have a bunch of, we just interacting yesterday with someone over at Secret Service, and they were asking about ransomware. He said, them, all their friends, everybody working for the government are being sought out now by the other, China as an example, and they're going ahead and extorting and hitting them with the ransomware with the government employees. They're going across the board trying to identify who the government employees are and hitting with the ransomware. So if they're getting hit, that's a big concern. Obviously, the BYOD we talked about, the idea somebody brings that into your environment, there's the pathway potentially for the ransomware to start encrypting your servers, and that's why we're here, is because a lot of organizations have been hit with this ransomware. Data breach, obviously somebody gets into the environment, starts going ahead and doing charges on the credit cards from one of your members. We'll leave that alone. You know the significance of that, unfortunately. Malware. The whole idea here is we had a couple of different incidents where we were called in because in this case here, the FBI had come to this particular club. This club, their email server had been compromised, and it was being used to pump spam out, unsolicited emails, all sorts of bad. They were selling things, everything else. And as a result, once that happens, your email server gets blacklisted. That means that when you get blacklisted, all of the security tools that are out there go ahead and use these blacklists to go ahead and identify emails that they're going to go ahead and filter before they're allowed into your network to protect you. So if you wind up getting blacklisted, nobody can receive an email from anybody in your company. That is scary. And we've seen, in one particular organization we were recently called to when they had this problem, they said, well, they said, we never had this problem. We've been in business for 15 years. We never had this problem. Well, this is what we're starting to see. The ideas of proliferation and malware and all these different problems in organizations that never had to face these before. So this is just some examples. Here's an example of a ransomware attack. And the whole idea, what they're going to do is encrypt your hard drive. You can't use it until you pay. And in this case, if you're fortunate enough that it's only $500, well, you have to pay the $500. But the idea is you can't get access to the data in the meantime. So we want to go ahead and make sure we have lots of redundancy. We have lots of data all hooked up.
You pay that, can you do it the next day?
Sure, you can do if it's an unpatched vulnerability, you can keep hitting every single day. In a lot of cases, it's based on users doing dumb things that they're not made aware of that they shouldn't be doing in the corporate environment. In a lot of cases, yeah. All right, so what's the overall objective here? you're trying to get from where you're at to what's referred to as the desired state. And the whole objective here is you want to go ahead and look at this along like a report card type concept. Even if you were to go ahead and take the 12 areas of the PCI DSS and use that as a framework, the whole objective is to try to identify all the things that could potentially hurt you and start to think about what your defenses are for each of them. And the whole objective, if you were to think about this, well, I'm good in math, but I'm bad in English or whatever, the whole idea is you're trying to get a balanced report card is the whole objective. In a lot of the different frameworks that I get the opportunity to teach the government, the whole idea is what we're looking to do is go from where we're at to a desired state. In your case, the desired state may be PCI compliance, as an example. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and come up with a remediation list referred to as a plan of action and milestones. And the whole idea is a milestone because if you think about your approach in Rome, you're trying to figure out back in the day whether you should sleep in the woods or keep pushing on because you're closer to Rome. Well, they had the mile markers leading in there. So they use that terminology to identify where are you from where you're at to getting to your goal, the mile markers or the milestones. And so this plan of action and milestones where your home is going to be prioritized based on the potential impact and the likelihood. And we call that the impact likelihood metric. And the whole idea, we're trying to think about what could hurt us and what's the likelihood that that could potentially get us. So we go ahead and prioritize these so that we start from the most dangerous thing and work down to the least dangerous. And you saw that with the common vulnerabilities and exposures that the Department of Homeland Security puts there. They go ahead and they have the high risk, they have the moderate risk, and they have the lower risk. And the whole idea, you're working from the high down to try to protect yourself. So, just in summary here, these are some of the things that you would want to be concerned about. And you'll see this in that club director article. The stuff that we're talking about right now, you'll see that re-emphasized there in that article that I wrote or whatever. And hopefully it'll go ahead and help you kind of start to have a framework as to what you're looking at and kind of, so that you don't necessarily just throw your hands up and say, oh, what can I do? We want to go ahead and systematically go through the process of trying to shore up those vulnerabilities, like on that 73 Caprice Classic there, that you guys talked about, your known exploit. So that's what we're trying to do. And the whole idea here is one of the things that is very important for you, especially if you're in a GM role or you're in a civil liability governance type of role, is cyber insurance. In the CISM course, that's for information security managers, they estimate that 80% of the value of all corporations consists of the data on their drives. In other words, ones and zeros on the hard drives. In the United States, we don't make anything anymore. We reassemble Japanese cars, stuff like that, maybe make craftsman tools, maybe some other stuff, but for the most part, it's all about service with data, service with data. And so the whole concept here is that if 80% of the value of the organization or your operational value consists of the use of that data and those data systems, well, you should be looking at how you protect against civil liability or any other type of financial risk. Risk management is risk management is risk management. It's no longer, hey, how's your IT system? No, it's risk management to the whole organization. And so as you're sitting here, and I had a wonderful opportunity to interact with you both at the national level and here, the whole objective is at the end of the day, I sleep better knowing that at least you've heard some of the different concerns about risk management. And the whole objective here is risk is risk is risk is risk. And you want to go ahead and start to think about the concept of cyber insurance for the reason that if something bad happens, what is going to be your recourse? What is going to be your recourse from a civil liability standpoint, even just from a negative business impact that could occur if you no longer are able to go ahead and say, for instance, use your machine? How are you going to go ahead and deal with that? So either way, you'll see this in the article there, a bunch of different things. We talk about end user security awareness training and the concept of Trojans. We talk about the concept of constant patching and testing. The idea of if something happens and we go to the environment, are you logging? Do you know what actually occurs? In a corporate environment, they spend a super amount of area of focus in what happened. And the idea is all the individual machines are logging, and then they're pumping those log files, and they're doing log file correlation. Because if our forensics teams come in, we have to go ahead and figure out what happened. In a lot of cases, if you're not going ahead and logging how the systems are functioning and what they're experiencing, it becomes harder for you to figure out and then to change your defensive posture. Because that's what it's all about. We're trying to reduce the risk to the operational impact of how your environment is working. And so the whole idea is these are just some of the best practices that you will go ahead and experience there to go ahead and protect your environment comprehensively. So we've got a minute or two for questions. 5 minutes. 5 minutes for questions. So maybe we'll jump over here just for a second.
What should we look for in cyber insurance?
Well, here's the thing. One of the When Sino had a 25-year risk management background, the parent company was already selling insurance and stuff like this. Our CEO was contacted by the underwriters to start developing programs for cyber insurance a number of years ago. One of the concerns that the underwriters had was, hey, if we're going to go ahead and offer somebody insurance, how do we properly adjust the premiums to go ahead and make it worthwhile for them? And the answer was that they wanted to go ahead and ensure that in order to get a lower premium, they would do that if somebody met compliance. And so what they would do is they would go ahead and work against the compliance standard. So the whole idea is that if you were able to go ahead and illustrate to the insurance organization that you had met some type of compliance, it would reduce the premiums based on that. So when you talk about with the cyber insurance, one of the things that the underwriters are concerned about is how safe is the environment and have they done their due diligence to go ahead and verify that those holes have been remediated.
What I'm looking for is, what do I want to have covered? I mean, if anything that has to do with computers?
Well, generally the operational data flow is one concern. In other words, the impact to the operational if a particular server was to go down. In a lot of cases, it's dealing with the value of the information in that environment and the negative impact. Dennis, you want to add to anything pertaining to that? Dennis is on the financial side of the house.
What I want to know, if I'm going to go shopping for cyber insurance, what do I want to have covered?
As far as
Well, for example, in a club, we don't have our members' social security numbers in most cases. We don't handle credit cards in most cases. So, from my perspective, it's like, what do I have that they want? But
would a hacker hack?
Yeah. But when I look at this, clearly there are things that.
Absolutely.
So
Just
what is
personal information.
what is the list of things that I want to look at my insurance company and say, okay, that's a complete package, as on cyber insurance?
Well, cyber insurance is what it's going to do is protect the club, indemnify the club if someone was to sue the club, or if there was a hack and you had to notify all your members. Years ago, when there was no real cyber insurance, let's say Chase Bank got hacked, they would just send a letter out to their customers saying there was a breach in our system. We're going to change your credit card number and don't worry about it. This day and age, people are suing everybody. So it's basically going to indemnify the club against a lawsuit. And there's a million ways to protect against that.
So does it not cover the cost of the ransomware?
No, it will not cover costs. But it's protecting the club, indemnifying the club against a lawsuit.
Okay.
And covering some expenses.
Some expense.
Right. Depending on policy. It's hard to answer this question without going through, your particular club and seeing what coverage you actually need. Because you could take a policy that's broad or take a policy that's not expensive and just cover the basic.
Hopefully that's helpful there. Yep.
Buttons on hosting your own email or going to a third party providers.
Both sides are of concern. Obviously, it's going to, in a lot of cases, depend on the staff and your ability to obviously protect. In other words, if you're hosting your own email, then you have to be vigilant against protecting it. So in a lot of cases, it's more on a question as far as how well you would be able to protect it. The challenge, the concern about with the cloud providers and other stuff like this, in a lot of cases, you're hoping that somebody who's already vetted them out. In a lot of cases, they know that you would be vetting them out, and they will have had audits done by Booz Allen Hamilton, big boys, to go ahead and ensure that they are properly protected all across the board. The challenge, for the most part, would be, or the concern about cloud-based or any type of service is that if that overall system was to be compromised, how it would impact you. So if you have it, say, for instance, in-house, if you're hosting your own email, well, the idea is there's the additional level that you're going to have to do to protect it, and the potential impact is there as far as if you don't have the staff to do that. But generally, when you use an outside email services, The concern wouldn't necessarily be about whether their systems are going to work, because they generally are going to go ahead replicating out the gigantic server farms, and they're protecting their data. So yes, obviously a large email hosting company could be compromised, and that would be a concern. But a lot of times it comes down to the fact that a lot of companies don't have the resources to actually ensure that their email system, that they're able to go ahead and properly protect their own email system. As far as people doing on the outside of the cloud services, the whole objective would be, if going back to the concern of civil liability or something like that, would be, did you properly vet them out? In other words, when larger organizations go ahead and you decide to use a cloud service, they will even go ahead and have in the service level agreements the right to audit their books and to go ahead and actually see the results of their audits and to verify across the board that all of the documentation is in place, so that if there is a problem, the individual, like say for instance a GM, could go ahead and say, well, I did everything that a reasonable person would have done, and that would go ahead and limit the financial exposure and negative impact from civil liabilities. Other stuff? Questions? Yeah. Sure.
You talked about rents.
Sure.
Is there a division of the FBI that got involved with that?
Yes. However, the federal government agencies generally are so overwhelmed with the amount of things they have to deal with. If you are a small organization, you're going to be pretty far down on the response list, considering who the larger organizations that have their attention. Especially when you're talking about local municipalities and local stuff. What we see nowadays is all of the local law enforcement are pumping their people through the classes that I teach, because the whole idea is that they in the past didn't have the resources and they would just flip it to the federal government. The federal government's so overwhelmed right now, whether it's the Secret Service or whatever different organizations responsible for this, that if you have a club with 30 computers and and 400 members or something like this, you're going to be on the bottom of that list, because they have to deal with much more significant as far as volume and also impact, even as a result of like Stuxnet, Dooku, and Flame, where people are going after the SCADA, the industrial control systems. They're worried about people shutting down grids and stuff like this. If you're a club with, they're going to try to help, but you may go ahead and not be the top priority. And that's the challenge. And that's why local law enforcement is overwhelmed right now. They're going ahead and trying to train people up as fast as possible, because now it's a cyber world, and that's what it is. So hopefully that was helpful for you. And either way, if you need any help or whatever, obviously, feel free to reach out or whatever. But hopefully, if you get a chance to go ahead and take a look at that article that's coming out next month, and hopefully that will go ahead and help you to start to think about how to reprioritize your defense, and hopefully this will give you some different insight on your personal life as well as your professional life about different concerns, and that this is something you should think about. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Fantastic.
Thank you, Fred. And there's no truth to the rumor that we set out today to do nothing but scare you with all these programs. We are going to take a short 10-minute break and then come back. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but I will repeat this. We will post all of the presentations from today online, so you have access to them. And I'll make sure that we put the club director article that he just offered for our magazine, so you can see that as well, which is at the printer right now. All right, thank you. 10 minutes.